24 Hours of Le Mans in 1966 was one of the most significant races in motorsport history. Immortalized on the silver screen by the Ford versus Ferrari movie, Le Mans 66 was all about two automotive giants going head-to-head in a tale of two very different worlds.
Just shut your mouth and let me do my thing.
While the film centered on the story of the relationship between Ken Miles and Carroll Shelby, the real significance was the arm wrestle between the manufacturers.
We have to keep in mind that the creation of Le Mans is in 1923, and from the beginning until, let's say, the mid-60s, the car makers winning at Le Mans are all European car makers. And the best one from that era is Ferrari, with 9 overall wins at Le Mans. Never an American car manufacturer won at Le Mans in that period. It is true that at the beginning, Ford came to Le Mans to beat Ferrari, to destroy Ferrari, because of that economical war they had trying to buy Ferrari. So I mean, Le Mans was again the field to solve the difference they have between the two guys, Enzo Ferrari and Henry Ford.
The mid-60s, that was an era, actually until the mid-70s, that endurance racing and F1 were on equal foot in terms of technology, in terms of budget, and in terms of worldwide audience, and in terms of media interest as well. The two categories were really going head-to-head for worldwide audience and to get the best drivers, to get the best manufacturers, and get the best teams out there.
In the blue corner, the blue oval, Henry Ford II personally oversaw the racing project, spurred on by Ferrari, using Ford's interest to ensure Fiat bought a majority stake in his company. That ensured he would be able to remain at the helm of its racing projects.
When Ford had decided to enter Le Mans, the way they changed racing was also massive in terms of budget, because we all know that they had an unlimited budget for this race. For the first time, whether it's Formula One or whether it's endurance racing or even NASCAR, money was no object at all in order to win.
In the red corner, Ferrari took Le Mans just as seriously those days as it takes Formula One today.
Enzo Ferrari was all about racing. He started making cars and selling cars just to go racing.
The Scuderia had won the previous 6 editions, and Enzo Ferrari was in no mood to allow Ford, in particular, to break its stranglehold of success.
It was a perfect rivalry, two automotive giants that genuinely hated each other. Enzo Ferrari said some really nasty things about Henry Ford II, so there was a lot on the line. The 1965 race had been a disaster for Ford. It couldn't afford another failure. It really was a win-at-all-cost effort from their side in particular.
Henry Ford II was the honorary starter, waving away the 55 drivers to run across the track and jump into the cars. Seconds after he does so, the Ford of John Whitmore and Ferrari of Ludovico Scarfiotti collide, right in front of Ken Miles in the number 1 car. That leads Miles to being forced to pit at the end of the first lap, as his door required fixing. F1 champion Graham Hill led initially in Ford number 7, and Ford takes a 1-2-3 lead by the end of the first hour, with Miles still regaining the ground he'd lost. Dan Gurney was now in front of the Ford number 3, but Miles was storming through the field and would take the lead by hour 3. By 8 p.m, only 3 cars remained on the lead lap, with Miles leading Gurney and Pedro Rodriguez in the best place Ferrari. Such is the early pace that records seem certain to fall, but it comes at a mechanical cost, as both Ferrari and Ford suffer earlier technical failures. A major crash occurs as Jean-Claude Ogier lost control on spilled oil and is rammed hard by François Paquet in number 54. Ogier suffered 2 broken arms and his car sparks a major fire.
The night, the shortest of the year, changes the nature of the event for the spectators.
As darkness descended, rain began to fall. This played into the hands of the more nimble Ferraris, and suddenly the Scuderia surged into a 1-2 as Fords encountered brake problems, which was their Achilles heel. The solution to this was a quick change system, which allowed them to change both rotors and pads simultaneously. By midnight, the rain had eased, and Ford re-established its earlier 1-2 of Miles and Gurney. Ferrari suffered overheating issues, and one by one, the beautiful Works 330 P3s and privateer entries dropped out of the race, with transmission and engine failures costing the Italian marque dearly. Scarfiotti also crashed out in the Ferrari number 20. Ford wasn't without problems though, as Gurney retired from the lead with a head gasket failure at 9 AM on Sunday morning, having been racing very hard against Miles at the time. Despite this, Ford held a 1-2-3 with Miles' number 1 car well clear of Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon, number 2 car.
In the very early morning, car number 1, driven by Ken Miles and Denny Hulme, was leading the race with more than 2 laps ahead from the car number 2, Chris Amon, Bruce McLaren. And then the gap was really bigger with car number 5 and the others.
Still in the race. On distance, the 5 prototypes are well stacked up. Behind these are the 2 Fords up front, the 1 and the 2.
Then came the finish, which remains disputed until this day. Under instructions from Ford's racing director Leo Bieber, Miles was told to slow his pace. Ford wanted a formation finish that was posed for the world's cameras to see its moment of glory. In his post-race press release, Ford insisted it was attempting a dead heat for its winning cars, without knowing that the race organizers had decreed that in this event, the car which covered the longest distance would be the winner. And that was the McLaren Amon car, which started well behind the Miles Hume machine.
In the film, you see Miles cross the line in front of McLaren on a beautifully sunny day. That didn't happen. For a start, it was raining, and McLaren took the checkered flag first, with Miles clearly in second place. He checked up before the finish line.
It's not. This is not a documentary. So many little details. Of course, they got it. Either they got it wrong, or they cut the corners.
But that's a movie, so you have to change a little bit to make sometimes a small details a little bit bigger to have a perfect understanding for a general attendance. I mean, not only for regular, passionate fans of the sports car.
I don't trust him an inch.
We heard he's difficult.
No, Ken's a puppy dog.
There's certain things you can say were not accurate. I mean, my father never threw a wrench and broke a windshield. Never got in a fist fight with Shelby. So, but that said, the portrayal of his personality was actually pretty close. He could be short-tempered or aloof or even arrogant, but he was probably what bothered people the most is he was so self-confident that they didn't really care for that.
Ford didn't care for Miles. That part of the film was accurate. But the great mystery is, how did he lose those laps he was leading the race by? One version of events comes from Shelby's crew chief, Charlie Agapew. He was the mechanical whiz kid of the team, and says that a set of bedded-in brakes that was meant for Miles's car was actually taken by McLaren's team. It meant Miles got a set of brakes he just couldn't drive with. They hadn't been prepared, and he just wasn't anticipating the way they'd handle. Miles had to make 2 extra pit stops while he worked out what was going on. They found an extra set of brake rotors, but nobody was sure whether they were bedded in or not, but they just sent him on his way again. Was this self-sabotage by Ford to get the drivers they preferred on the top step?
No, I don't think that corporate Ford, any of the guys in there, made an effort to sabotage or favor any particular guy. They just wanted Ford finish, and they wanted 1, 2, 3 if at all possible. So yeah, they had my father slow down, but depending on who you talk to, he was leading by a bunch of laps, or he's leading by 40 seconds or 4 minutes. It just depends.
McLaren and Amon were crowned Le Mans winners, with Henry Ford the second on the podium. Moments later, they were joined by Hume and Miles, who walks across and congratulates McLaren.
I think Christian Bale played Miles very accurately in the film. I think Ken shook Henry's hand on the podium, probably without saying a word. Then he strolled over to Bruce, and after sipping his champagne, probably asked him about those brakes.
There's victory within defeat, right? He did achieve this lap that was record-breaking. They did do it their way. There is no surprise that corporations behave this way, that they're not out to be purist racers as these guys are. But they still knew that they bloody did it. They really did. Now, there is a version where you can do a whole film about just that. What happened there, the different perspectives, the different ideas. Everyone still to this day disagrees about what actually happened, yes. You know?
It's always hard, you know, when you're making a movie, a 2-hour movie, it's really hard to distill people's lives down into that amount of time, so you gotta take license and you gotta kind of figure out what's your angle of attack, and once they kind of narrowed it down to this relationship, you know, you've got Ken and Shelby, and then Ken with his wife and son, and that's kind of just a, you know, a kind of perfect amount to make a movie about.
So there's a question as to whether my father was a little mad at corporate and actually hit the brakes to slightly disturb that perfect finish, or if McLaren got on a little bit. That's another one of those debatable things, and if you talk, what I heard from Chris Damon was, I wouldn't be surprised if he did that. And then you hear the story from McLaren's supposedly letter to his father that he set the whole thing up. So, I don't know. To me, it's a piece of history, and I'm just, okay, it happened, I'm sorry my father didn't win. I wish he had, but it's, you know, it's just the way it is. It's okay. It's all good.
I think the lady's face on the podium says it all. I'd love to know what she heard him say.
Ford's victory in 1966 paved the way for a string of success for the Blue Oval, which would win the French Classic another 3 times. And for Ferrari?
Ferrari has never won Le Mans outright again. Just think about that. Ford's GT40 was a car that changed the sports car landscape forever. This victory was seismic in every sense. In the battle between Henry Ford II and Enzo Ferrari, the Deuce won. American muscle beat Italian sophistication.